We have a guest in the studio, the Honorable Daniel NANOK, MP for Turkana West. Before we welcome him to the show, City, the proverb?
Yes, we are now in the country of Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
A leopard's eye is on the goat. The goat's eye is on the leaf.
Leopard's eye is on the goat. Goat's eye is on the leaf. Here's a proper herdsman in the studio now here with us. Mheshimiwa NANOK, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank
That
you for having
proverb,
me here.
does it make sense?
I think it does. I think it does.
What's your interpretation of it?
The leopard's eye is on the goat.
The goat's eye is on the leaf.
The goat's eye is on the leaf. Of course, I can visualize that to be in the grazing field where this innocent goat is going about grazing. And of course, there is danger stalking it without it realizing that there is danger. That's how I perceive that saying.
So there's danger lurking.
It's preoccupation here.
Yeah.
I like what Mheshimiwa said, the innocent goat. But he should have added, is chewing on the innocent leaf. Okay? And the innocent leopard
is hunting.
Okay.
Everyone is preoccupied with what is important. Because each one is looking at what constitutes food for them or fodder. This twig, this leaf is what the goat eats. So it's eyeing it. The leopard doesn't eat leaves. The leopard, on the other hand, eats goats.
It eats the thing that eats leaves.
Yes, exactly. So you could argue that the leopard is a vegetarian.
Okay. Mheshimiwa, the last time you were here, we were talking about insecurity in your part of the country, in Turkana and Turkana West. Now, we want to talk about the ongoing drought situation. So if we just look back into the last couple of years, failed rainfall, insufficient rainfall, then there's, of course, the visit by those locusts, came and went, so they affected the fodder that had grown. Now we have continued drought, no rainfall. What is the situation like as we speak today in your constituency?
The situation is getting dire by the day. It's very dry, it's very hot, and it is very windy. Dry winds. It really looks tough for our pastoralists and everybody else who depends on pastoralism as an economic activity, as a way of living, of life. The waters are gone. There's no rain, and there's nothing to replenish whatever water bodies that may have been there. So the animals are trekking very long distances to look for pasture and to look for water. Same to, of course, the herders. They are getting to very, very insecure areas of the county where they think they can get fodder and water. And so conflict is bound to increase. If you knew the map of Turkana County, we border 3 international border countries, Uganda to the west, South Sudan to the northwest, and Ethiopia to the north. And that is a very long border stretch. It is along that border stretch that you're likely to find any remnant of dry grass. Okay? Why? Because those are not areas that you access easily.
Why?
because of insecurity. If you move there, you may not spend the night before you are hit.
So the communities that live across the border,
Yes,
are the ones that would then attack you.
yes, because we are not at peace with them because of this, cattle rustling business. Sort of the cultural conflicts that exist between, unfortunately, Ateker community. The same people. The Turkana and the Jie, the Turkana and the Drought, Turkana and the Toposa, Turkana and the Nyangatom. These are the same people, speak the same language, same cultural practices, but in different countries. And so there is conflict. So it's getting bad. And I tell you, something needs to be done.
Sure.
Yes.
I mean, we're looking at an issue that has to do with, the environment, largely. We're looking at geography. Where Kenya sits geographically means that, unfortunately, we will see this move towards drought. Sometimes there will be lack of rain. The environment will be in a difficult position. The climate also will be in a difficult position. And we've seen the situation worsening over years. We also then have early warning systems in place that will tell us what is going to happen over time. That means that there are things that could have been done. Even as we see the situation getting bad, I, for one, have been really, really concerned about seeing people dying, livestock going to loss. In your mind, as a leader, from that local perspective, and then also taking the national responsibility into consideration, this is something that needs to be done. In your mind, what is it?
Two perspectives. This has become like not normal, but an occurrence that must happen. The drought. It's getting worse because of, I think, the climate change issues, so that we do not get enough rains. Like this particular case, Odu, we have not had what we could say to be good rainfall for the last 3 years. 3 years is such a long time that whatever you may have gathered will definitely have gotten depleted by now. So one, the perspective I'm talking of too is, it is something that is expected really to happen, and therefore good planning would have required that government and the communities involved are prepared for such. Okay, so that it doesn't take them unawares to a case where it becomes kind of an emergency. So for planning, because it is bound to happen, and therefore take actions that are going to address that occurrence when it comes, because it must come.
Specifically,
Okay.
Mheshimiwa,
Yes.
if you just say, what do you think ought to have been done, say last year?
By last year, government definitely would have started, say, stocking food. Okay, knowing that there will be need to have relief food or emergency food distribution in such areas. Not only in Turkana, actually a big chunk of northern Kenya is actually going through this. Secondly, interventions such as drilling of boreholes, creating water pans for livestock water, and even fodder, moving, growing and moving fodder closer to these areas, in areas where they got a little bit better rainfall. Those are activities or interventions that would have started happening because we have a department or departments that are in charge of these situations in government in Kenya.
Should this have been done by the county governments or the national government?
Definitely the county government as the immediate government in place and knowing or understanding the situation of the area. But again, you talk of county government, they will tell you we don't have enough funding, and so we also depend on the national government, because that is where county governments also draw their revenues from,
Okay.
or incomes from. So the buck will end up, at the door of the national government.
From what you know,
Yeah.
what has been done? Which of this has been done to any degree of success?
You know, Eric and Tim, last year, we came from, last year, 2021, is when we were just coming out of the corona pandemic.
Yes.
And I'm aware, and you are aware, that corona really disorganized the world, disorganized government. And so let's keep that in mind, and maybe that can be given as a reason as to why maybe we're not prepared, because we were already in an emergency situation.
Yeah.
But county government, for instance, would have started looking at areas of drilling boreholes, okay, doing water pans, knowing that we had very good rains during the coronavirus beginning in Turkana County, particularly in my sub-county. There was good rains, and that kept us well and safe during the corona pandemic.
So this was around 2020.
2020.
Okay.
But then you had the problem of the locusts. And actually those locusts swept across Turkana County again.
Yeah.
So it was it's been a tough 3 years for us as a county, and that informs what could be happening now. And so what should have been done was not done, because there were those emergencies that were being handled. The locusts, the corona, and now we are on with the drought. It's really tough.
Let me ask this question, Mheshimiwa. When you say that the rains were good, well, this is me saying it, paraphrasing what you said. Are you saying that the people in the sub-county you come from had a scheme and a plan to harvest rainwater?
There has that harvest is something that has been is ongoing, okay. And how do we harvest the waters? Many a times the waters, because they come in a flood.
It's a deluge. It's a lot of it at once.
You really need to prepare to do water pans during, say, this kind of season, when there is no rains, but you know how the waterways move and where they are, and so you can dam some of these areas and store this water. This is the most the immediate thing that comes to mind.
But it isn't done.
No, not satisfactorily. In my sub-county particularly, there was an intervention by DANIDA, the Danish embassy
Aid agency.
And they gave us about 4 or 5 water pans that could hold between 30,000 cubic meters of water and 50,000. And we spread them out in 5 wards. I have 7 wards. At least every ward of the 5 got a water pan. Okay? And the water pan water is meant for livestock.
It is.
Okay. But you will be surprised that is the water that is also used by...
It's for human consumption.
By the people.
And it's not sustainable either from
It is not. It is not, because it must be replenished. Replenishing means you have rains. So if you don't have rains for 4 or 5 seasons, then whatever was collected got depleted, and there's nothing to use because of this drought.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these areas are solely, not even heavily, but solely dependent on the rain. And we're saying that if it doesn't rain, that then to get any kind of intervention would be very difficult. So in terms of watering animals, in terms of irrigating crop, that will not happen if it doesn't rain. So today, people across the country are hungry. Almost 5 million people are on the verge of starvation. Some have died and some are looking. In terms of immediate intervention, what needs to be done now? These things that we are talking about, damming water, storing food, having irrigation systems set up whereby you're using a minimal amount of water to water crop, those are not things that can be done with immediacy. Obviously, policy that we know has been developed needs to be put in place. But today, people are hungry. What needs to happen today?
What needs to happen today and now is there is need for emergency relief or food relief interventions as an immediate action or activity. There is need to provide fodder for the livestock or animal feed, for that matter, for these animals that are still around. Because as we continue into this very difficult time, animals that cows and goats and sheep that move, and even camels, unfortunately even camels now are affected, will be required to move very long distances. There's nothing as bad as moving animals that are emaciated already, going to look for water.
They will die.
Yeah. You just 2 days. And all those animals, if they were to lie, they will all remain there. None of them will move after that. Or if they get to drink, they will all remain at the watering point. So, as an immediate intervention, we need food for the people. We need food or fodder for the livestock. And there will be need to do water tracking for both people and animals in those very severely hit areas. And they're just about the whole county, actually. Actually, right now, within Turkana, what we know as Turkana Central, parts of, literally the whole of Turkana North now, parts of Turkana East and South, there's nothing. There are no animals. All the animals are moving towards the border, the international border areas where they think they can get something. And you know how vast Turkana is. As an immediate action also, I think we need just to face it and say, maybe Kenya as a country, within our own resources, we may not be in a position to sort out this problem because it is affecting a very huge population. And therefore, why can't the president and the country declare this a national disaster? So that the rest of the world can actually come in to support us.
That was done by the president, Uhuru Kenyatta, in 2021. And they said that the budget for addressing it was 6 billion shillings. The government was putting aside 2 billion shillings and now opening up the gates for resource mobilization for another 4 billion shillings. We don't know how far that has gone. And the importance
in 2021.
That was last year. So we are a year into a national disaster that is still ongoing, that is threatening to get worse. City, you were asking something.
It's a problem, and we are all trying to determine how best we should handle this problem. Yet, if you look at the cycles of drought in this country, you talk about from the 60s. Let's talk about Turkana specifically. The cycles were 5-year cycles. They're now almost yearly. Now, we've had a prolonged one. It's not yearly. It's just ongoing, meaning it's become the norm. We actually have a state agency that is charged with this duty of managing such disasters. It's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. We are not the only country in the world that has had this problem, but we have a unique benefit. We have research organizations that understand these severe natural conditions like drought, even floods. We have CalRO, we have ChemFree, we have the forestry research. We have all these organizations who are in a position to help us understand going forward the sort of, for instance, grasses you need to plant in places like Turkana, grasses that are resistant to drought, trees that are resistant, crops that are resistant. In addition to that, when you talk about harvesting water, it is true that even when we talk of drought, we often talk of the twin disaster that is caused by more rain than you know what to do with. It's an even bigger disaster because rain is useful, but we simply let it go away. We never do anything with it. And yet containing it and making sure that we harvest it is something that can be done. It doesn't require a lot of technicalities. It is not really that costly. It's something that the county government can do. Now, what am I saying? I am saying that we haven't exhausted the resources that we have within the country fully. Mheshimiwa, grass that has been developed by CalRO in this country is what sheep and cattle feed on in Australia and in Brazil, in case you didn't know. We exported that grass. We have the know-how. Why CalRO doesn't have a huge station in some of these semi-arid places in the country? They once upon a time did. We know this for a fact because in some of the places like Kilifi, they had these stations. Somewhere along the line, they were let go of funding it, whatever the issues. But areas like that, where apart from just carrying out the research, the implementation can take place because there is the know-how to ensure that drought and the situations around it are mitigated against. I'm talking about local capacity before we go to international. It hasn't been exhausted. The government's talk about huge amounts of money and what they plan to do will always touch the surface of the problem, but it will never provide a lasting solution, which, irrespective of which government comes in, year out, you're able to say, we have this in place, all we need to do is ensure that it continues working. Because you have water pans. Do you dredge the water pans? Because if you don't dredge them, what happens the time when it rains? Silt comes in and the surface area of those water pans get less. So with every passing season, it contains less and less water.
Muga, I mean, just as you've, mentioned about the research institution being there, and so we have local capacity as Kenya.
We do.
To be able to handle these problems. Then what the question that begs the answer is, and so what? Is it funding? Is it the government that is not funding? No. Government funds institutions. CalRO is funded every year. It's not that it is not funded. Where is the problem? Well, 2020, because of knowing these challenges of lack of water and therefore the need to store water, I had asked the water ministry to give me some water pans. I mean, they were budgeting for water pans, and I went asking to the PS, and he gave me a water pan. Actually, not one, two, to do in my constituency, and I had identified 2 areas. What happened is when the water resource, what is this, water resource
authority
were now to implement that water pan. They tendered it, gave it to some guy from Nairobi here to come and implement in a very remote area of my constituency. Do you know that water pan was not done?
Was not done meaning what?
Effectively, it was not done. I mean, I don't have a water pan.
So what did the contractor
But
do?
whatever the contractor did, he went to the site, tried to do some work, okay, and ran away.
And he was paid.
Now, whether he was paid or not...
So the water there was nothing to harvest the water.
Yes. The intervention, which had he done what was supposed to be done,
Yeah.
had there been supervision of that work by the authority that
Gave
the work, at least we would have an extra...
We'd have had two.
Yes,
extra
I would
water
have had 2 water bodies that would help my pastoralists. None was there. That is one other problem. Okay?
Challenges.
So
Let's
when
take a break,
Muga says, we are capacity, Kenyans, we have a problem.
It's 26 minutes to 8. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. The Honorable Daniel NANOK is the MP for Turkana West. We are talking about the disaster that's unfolding across the country. With this drought, people don't have food, livestock don't have access to fodder, no access to water. What is happening and what needs to happen immediately?
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
The Honorable Daniel NANOK, MP, Turkana West. We are talking about the unfolding food insecurity situation in the country. People sleeping, waking up without any hope of anything to eat or drink. Mheshimiwa, if you just look at the speeches by the Minister for Finance in the last couple of years, 2020, 21, 21, 22, now 22, 23, there's always mention of supporting either the arid and semi-arid areas, the pastoralists, looking at drought mitigation measures, disaster response, and allocating hundreds of millions, if not billions of shillings every year. Where does this money go? And when you are looking at it as Parliament, do you ever raise the question of whether the money is sufficient or not? Like, let me give you, I've just looked at the speech, not the current budget, but the previous budget, 2021, 2022, where in his speech to Parliament, he spoke about improving livestock production, setting aside 3 billion shillings for disease holding ground in Lamu. That's one side, but also 488 million shillings set aside for the Regional Pastoral Livelihood Resilience Project. Regional Pastoral Livelihood Resilience Project. That sounds very much like what should be coming to your area.
Yeah.
455 million shillings for the Kenya Livestock Commercialization Program should be coming to you. 163 million shillings for Livestock Value Chain Support Project. If you look at what else comes into your area, there's a lot of money here that I'm just seeing, in hundreds of billions. If you combine, it's to the tune of billions of shillings in every year. In supplementary budgets, the one that was taken to Parliament before the election, there was money set aside for disaster and, of course, drought mitigation. Where does this money go?
Good. It's a good observation, Eric. Government is a big institution. And when the minister reads all those, get to know that the budget is a plan. And sometimes plans don't get implemented. Some, of course, a good chunk, of course, gets implemented, but some don't get implemented. I was lucky to be in that committee that oversights the National Treasury and the planning docket. And we have had these conversations with the minister for the whole time he's been there. One thing that happened is there was a change of plan in the ministry or by the government on how to handle emergencies in these arid and semi-arid areas. I think it should have been 2019, 2020. Before 2019, there was a monthly support program given to ASAL areas, what they used to call emergency food relief.
Yeah.
It was a monthly budgeted item where you would get some maize, beans, cooking oil, some nutritional value, high value nutrition food
From national government, sorry.
from the national government.
Okay.
And that food would go to every sub-county. Okay? It wasn't a lot of food, but it was, like in my constituency, I would get about 500 bags of maize a month, 200 or 300 bags of beans, about 100 cartons of oil. This, as it was stated, was emergency relief. So it was augmenting whatever used to be there. Mark you that there is also a program called the Cash Transfer Program by the government, Hunger Safety Net Program, under the Ministry of Social,
The Department for Social Protection.
Yes, social protection, correct. And these were programs that were ongoing. But this was stopped by government. Then the government said, let us handle all these emergencies through the contingency fund. To get to the contingency fund, you must declare these disasters.
Yeah.
Okay? And it is a figure, it's a known figure. Every year they used to budget about 5 billion in the contingency fund. But only used when there was an announcement of an emergency. So for as long as you have not announced, you don't reach out to the contingency fund. It's not accessible to anybody or to any department. So the ministry would keep that money until you get those emergencies declared. But before that, it wasn't being declared. You provided for it as a budget line item for some government department. ASAL department in the Ministry of Devolution used to get that money.
Okay.
And they used to give that relief. That thing was stopped.
Why?
September last year.
Maybe government would know why they did that. Reorganization of expenditure. Maybe there could have been wastages. I don't know. Whatever informed that decision, we tried to argue, particularly those of us from the ASAL areas, that this was going to seriously affect our livelihoods. And okay, our reasoning wasn't taken in. And so the decision was made. Kidogo, a lot of money goes to Equalization Fund on an annual basis, 7 billion, 8 billion. That money is not serving any purpose. It has not flowed. It's not being implemented. Equalization Fund has not been activated.
It's about to
with
expire.
all the challenges of, I don't know, the county governments saying they are the ones who should implement. The national government, of course, reads the constitution. They can implement it directly. And so that bickering between the two government levels of government has costed the ASAL areas development that would have gone towards some of these mitigation
Before City asks this question,
measures.
Mheshimiwa, I just want to remind you that on the 8th of September last year, a meeting took place in State House, Nairobi, between the President of the Republic of Kenya, then Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, and 85 leaders from the Kenya arid and semi-arid lands. And this is where the ongoing drought was declared a national disaster. And the President directed the National Treasury and the Ministry of Interior to spearhead the government's efforts to assist affected households, including water and relief food distribution, as well as livestock uptake. Were you in that meeting?
I wasn't in that meeting. You're saying in State House?
In State House,
September I used to be a member of the Jubilee Party. So I should have been in that meeting. I don't know how it...
You are a leader from ASAL.
Assholes, yeah.
Yes. And how I didn't attend that meeting. That must have been some of those meetings that were that were politically
85
planned.
leaders from the ASAL areas.
Yeah. It could have been cherry picking.
It was declared a national disaster. As a member of the crucial committee of the National Assembly, did it also not come to your attention that now we have a national disaster? So the money that was said we cannot get into the consolidated fund anymore because of the contingency fund, because of this and the other. Now we have a disaster in place. A national disaster has been declared, so we can now access the money.
You know, Eric, pronouncements are not equal to activity. Okay. Already you're saying this meeting took place. I, as an MP from that particular area, wasn't invited into the meeting. Well, I don't have necessarily to have been there, but if action was, if decisions were made, they would have reached our people, and I would have seen. Yeah. So those decisions that were made on that 8th of September have not reached. They have not, helped our people. What happened is that there was some lopsided intervention in some of the areas. Yeah? Some of the areas maybe where the minister would come from, maybe were the ones that were supported. The rest were not. And
But
so...
I'm seeing something that you're doing, Wishmu, and I don't want you to get out of this. As a responsible leader from this area, as somebody who sits in which committee of the National Assembly was that?
That was finance.
That was the finance committee.
Planning.
All right, finance and planning committee. You're the ones who actually look, in addition to the budget committee, you look at now the taxation measures the government is putting in place and all those, and reviewing what the government is doing with the money that it's collecting. Now, you are saying you are not aware that this meeting took place. It's okay. Yeah. But a year down the road, Mweshimua, you do not know that the national disaster was declared then. And even now, as you looked at this year's, the 2022-2023 budget, and looking at the finance measures, as a leader of the people of Turkana West, didn't you ask yourself, so where is the money going to come from to help my people? Because we're clearly going to have a serious situation.
Eric, these plans are there. Okay? The budget 2022-20 is there. We already did it. Okay? By April of this year, we had already done away with the budget for this financial year. So we know that there is a planned budgets have been done to be able to support these activities. Of course, we ask these questions. We ask the Ministry of ASAL, and is under devolution, okay? Yeah. And that is where this relief ASAL department, the one that is actually in charge of relief and emergencies, is domiciled. So what do they say? They say they're planning, they're buying food. You know, we've been told food is coming for the last 2 months. It's not reaching. Yeah? So, not that the plan is there. And actions have been pronounced, but
they have not been
actual
implemented.
Thing,
and I think that's probably
and that is where the challenge is. I don't know which is this button that I need to press so that this food can start flowing.
I think another question that people are asking is that how many more people need to die in order for this to happen? How many more children do we need to see falling from weakness? How many more herds of cattle we need to see dying? How many more children out of school do we need to see in order for something to be done? And I think I don't want to call it an emergency situation anymore. It is the situation. It's not a situation where now we have to now start being up in arms and shouting, oh my goodness, people are dying from hunger. Because this is not something that crept up on the country one day to the next and voila, here we are. This is something that has been happening for years. The geographic situation kind of forces this issue. So isn't it about time then that decisions became prescriptive in nature as to what needs to be done? We know that this area is going to be compromised. These areas around the country will be compromised because of lack of rain. We know that is going to happen. We know that it will probably occur in another 5 years. So this thing we are talking about, where every budget, shouldn't it then be, and isn't this what should be lobbied for on the floor of the National Assembly? For example, these 85 leaders that we are talking about talk about things like making it part of the national budget where food is provided in the budget, because we know that rainfall is going to be an issue in these areas. Food is provided, the same thing that you're talking about, on a monthly basis. It should be made law. because we know that this problem is going to occur. And when we ask ourselves the questions, what should be done, and we talk about some stopgap measure like water bowsers, it is not the solution. The solution is, we know that there's going to be rainfall. Can we legislate? And that's what members of parliament ought to do on the floor. Can we legislate and say that it doesn't matter? Food should be made available to people who are vulnerable in these areas. When the rains come, can measures be put in place to make sure that you save what little water you have, you store whatever little food you have, but the national government takes the responsibility for feeding people who are in these vulnerable areas? That's what ought to be done. Not this building a water pan here and then it disappears, somebody runs off with money and then we say, okay, let's wait for rain. It hasn't shown up for 3 years. It's not going to show up this year.
Mheshimiwa, in 2013, an aquifer, which we were told had the capacity of 200, yes, you know where I'm going with this, because you also mentioned in that report and the comments that you made, 200 billion cubic meters of water, which ostensibly could serve the entire Kenyan population for 70 years. However, small little however, not really drinkable, that water. But there was mention of a Saudi investor who was willing to put up a desalination plant. Again, these plants we speak of, where did that fizzle to? Let's start with, does the aquifer exist?
Going by the pronouncements and the research finding,
Yes.
it is there.
Okay.
Okay, because a borehole was drilled, which whose yield, I think, is over 100 cubic meters of water per hour.
Yes. Serious water.
Yeah, a lot of water. But you've put on the rider that it is not
Readily drinkable.
yes. About the Saudi investor, to me, it's
A story.
yeah, because if the investor is there, why has he or she not appeared? Because we need that water, like yesterday.
You see, the more pertinent question is,
And again, you look at the level of investment that is required to bring out that
get the
water. It's huge. It's
Yes.
not the kind of thing you would ask a county government that receives money in doses from national government to undertake on their own.
It has to be a
They
national
can't.
project.
It has to be a national project.
It even goes farther.
And that aquifer sits wholly, fully in my constituency.
yes, it does.
And it is in one of the driest areas of my constituency. So,
President Ruto
it
has
is
said-
about the president, even
said,
in 2017, the former president, when he was campaigning in Kakuma, and I have a clip to that effect, he promised to bring out that water if we voted him in. And that is one reason that informed the votes he
The
got
votes
in
he got.
2017 from my constituency.
Currently, the president
And he
has
didn't
said,
do anything.
The president has said,
No.
after being elected into
Well,
office, one of the things that the President Ruto has said is that he'd like to pursue PPPs for water
I have
provision.
heard that.
So,
And-
are you seeking a meeting with him to see how
Correct,
then the PPP
correct.
can happen?
Turkana County will definitely be seeking leadership, will be seeking audience with His Excellency and raise these issues. I know the president has said that and he's told us, me in person, because the aquifer sits in my constituency. But of course, we've not done anything. We'll give him the benefit of doubt for the time being. I think Eric and team, Odu mentioned of us legislating on ASAL programming so that they are in law, that food is available, water is available, Our schools are given special treatment in terms of food provision to schools. The school feeding program is one of those programs, but it is faltering. These days, the food doesn't go to schools regularly as it is required in the required quantities, So many programs that were there, that were put as interventions, are faltering, along the way, either because of fatigue, programming fatigue, or funding challenges. But I seek one thing. political goodwill. Okay? All these decisions, all these pronouncements, if there is no political goodwill, they fizzle out. They are left to wither out. And that is, I think, what is affecting the assaults. A little bit of lip service, and then we are made to feel happy because something is planned to be done, and it never gets done. Okay?
Something needs to happen.
So action must be done. I mean, something must be done to
Actions
show
must
us
follow
that
the
what
words.
is being planned for us is actually
Can be actualized.
yeah.
Mheshimiwa,
If
thank you.
Equalization Fund can be actualized, if Lotikipi aquifer can be drilled and this water gotten out, if the PPP program that will be pursued can be actualized,
Yeah.
this story will end.
One of your leading leaders, Mheshimiwa, your namesake, Joseph NANOK, is now in State House. Okay? You have access.
Is instead
Not
You
somewhere
have
else,
access.
in
You have
State
access.
House.
Mheshimiwa Daniel, thank you very much for joining us. He's the MP for Turkana West.